All right. So you wanted to know why huge companies, like the ones that just seem like they're on top of the world, sometimes totally wipe out when some new tech comes along.
Yeah.
You sent us Clayton Christensen's book, The Innovator's Dilemma, to kind of dig into that. And
It's a good one.
it is fascinating. This book, it's like a crystal ball.
Hmm.
It shows you like the good and the bad, the future that could be awesome, or the one that's like, oh,
Yeah, and Christensen really nailed it when he found out that it isn't just about companies being slow.
mm-hmm.
It's this whole idea of disruptive innovation. And that can take down even the biggest companies out there.
So it's not like just something being new and shiny.
Right, it's
It's
more than that.
There's got to be more to it.
Yeah, it's not just novelty. A
Right.
disruptive innovation, it usually starts out small.
Mm-hmm.
And it can even look kind of basic compared to what's already out there.
Okay.
It's like, think of a tiny little seed that sprouts up in the corner of this huge, perfectly manicured lawn. At first, you don't even notice it, right?
Right.
But if you give it some time,
Yeah.
it can grow into something that totally changes the whole landscape.
I like that analogy. I'm starting to get the picture here, but can we get into some specifics?
Sure.
I know the book uses digital cameras,
Yeah.
like as an example.
Right.
Now, those early digital cameras, I mean, they weren't exactly known for having like amazing picture quality, were they?
Exactly. And that's exactly why those big film companies just ignored them at first.
Okay.
They were busy. They were working on making film better,
Right.
higher resolution,
Mm-hmm.
finer grain, all that, catering to their professional photographers who needed the best of the best.
Okay.
That's what Christensen calls sustaining innovation. They're making a good product even better
Right.
for their existing customers.
Keep the people who already love you happy.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Keep them coming back for more.
So is that where these companies kind of get tripped up?
It can be a real problem.
Yeah.
They get so good at serving the market they've got
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that they miss those big changes that are happening somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
They almost become victims of their own success.
Oh, wow.
Like Nokia.
Oh, yeah.
Remember them?
Oh, yeah. I remember saving up for that, like, indestructible Nokia, like the brick phone.
Right. And they kept making those phones better and better.
Mm-hmm.
They listened to customers who wanted a longer battery life,
Yeah.
more durable designs.
Yeah.
But while they were busy perfecting that flip phone,
Uh-huh.
a whole different game was starting the smartphone.
Right.
And guess who was leading the charge on that?
I'm assuming not Nokia.
No.
Okay.
Companies like Apple.
Wait, are you telling me that, like, those first iPhones, like the really clinky ones,
Yeah.
those were disruptive?
They were disruptive innovation.
I mean, they weren't that great compared to a Nokia.
Exactly. And that's what's so interesting about disruptive innovations.
Okay.
They often don't look that impressive at first, especially not to those big companies who are already established.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. They start by appealing to a smaller market that's been kind of overlooked,
Right.
maybe offering some different features or a lower price.
Okay.
And as that technology gets better,
Mm-hmm.
it starts to climb up the ladder,
Mm.
and eventually it takes on that mainstream market.
Oh, wow.
Think about digital cameras,
Yeah.
how they went from grainy pictures to being even better quality than film.
Wow. So it's like a total flip of the script.
Yeah.
So you're saying that while companies like Nokia were listening to their customers, companies like Apple were looking at a whole new group of customers
Exactly.
with different needs.
That's a huge part of the disruptor's advantage.
Okay.
They don't have all those old products weighing them down
Mm-hmm.
or pressure from shareholders to keep doing the same old thing.
Right.
They can move faster, take bigger risks, and experiment with those markets that the big companies ignore.
So it's almost like they're playing a whole different game. I remember the book mentioned something about mini mills in the steel industry.
Yes.
What was that about?
Mini mills, they started out just producing low-grade steel.
Oh, okay.
They were serving the customers that the big steel mills didn't even care about.
So they're like picking up the scraps that the giants were leaving behind.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
But here's where it gets interesting.
All right.
Over time, those mini mills got better.
Mm-hmm.
Their technology improved.
Okay.
They started making higher grade steel,
Uh-huh.
and eventually they captured a big chunk of the market.
Okay, so we're starting to see how this disruptive innovation thing really works.
Yeah.
But if these big companies are so focused on their current customers, are they just doomed to be like overtaken by these up-and-comers?
Not necessarily doomed,
Okay.
but they definitely have to be proactive. Christensen actually has some really practical advice for these companies so they don't fall into that trap.
Okay, so what's the secret sauce?
Well, one of the big ideas is to create separate teams. almost like little internal startups,
Okay.
and, dedicate those teams to just exploring these new disruptive innovations.
So are we talking like skunkworks teams?
Yeah.
Like those secret labs you hear about in those big tech companies cooking up all the crazy new ideas?
Exactly. You got to give them the freedom to try things out,
Mm-hmm.
even to, fail sometimes
Right.
without being held back by, all the rules of the main business.
It's like set them loose.
Yeah.
Okay.
Remember IBM
Oh, yeah.
and how they got into personal computers?
I mean, back then, PCs were like toys compared to their big mainframe computers.
Exactly. Back then, PCs were seen as like a distraction.
Mm-hmm.
But IBM, they were smart. They created a whole separate division
Okay.
just focused on PCs,
And
and
then it took over.
the rest is history.
So they basically disrupted themselves
Mm,
before someone else could come along and do it to them.
exactly. It's like a preemptive strike.
That's pretty genius when you think about it.
It's a brilliant strategy.
So separate teams, check.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
Another big one is focusing on future markets.
Okay.
Even if those markets seem small or, not very profitable right now,
Right.
it's all about thinking ahead,
Mm-hmm.
figuring out where things are going, not just reacting to what's happening today.
So like that Wayne Gretzky quote,
Yeah.
skate to where the puck is going,
Exactly.
not to where it's been.
That takes some serious vision, though,
Yeah.
and, a little bit of guts
Right.
to put your money into something that might not pay off for years.
Yeah. It's a long game.
It is a long game. You
For
got to
you?
be in it for the long haul.
Thinking long term.
That's the key.
So separate teams focus on the future.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else these companies should be watching out for?
Constant vigilance.
Okay.
Got to keep a close eye on those startups,
Mm.
the new players in the game.
Right.
Don't just dismiss them because they're small.
Right. They could be the next big thing.
Exactly. In fact, learn from them. They're often the ones pushing the boundaries, experimenting with new ways of doing things.
So it's not just about having your own brilliant ideas. It's
Mhm.
also about being open to other people's ideas,
Absolutely.
even your rivals.
The most dangerous thing for any company is getting complacent,
Right.
assuming they have all the answers.
Like we're at the top. We're good.
Yeah. And that's a recipe for disaster,
Okay.
because that's when disruption hits you the hardest.
Blindsided.
Exactly. You never see it coming.
You know what I'm realizing? This is all pretty relevant even outside of the business world.
Mm-hmm.
It's about being adaptable, right?
It is.
Being open to new ideas.
Absolutely.
New ways of doing things.
That's what it's all about.
And that's where things get really interesting, right?
Yeah.
This book, The Innovator's Dilemma,
Mm-hmm.
it was written before we had social media,
Right.
smartphones, AI,
Yeah.
all those things that have like totally reshaped how we live.
And it happens so fast.
Yeah, in just a few years.
It's incredible how quickly things can change.
So how does all this apply to us? I mean, we're
Right.
not all running these huge companies.
That's a great question.
How can we actually use these ideas in our everyday lives?
Think of Christensen's framework as like a mental model,
Okay.
a way to understand disruption in any field,
Mm-hmm.
not just business.
Okay.
It helps you question your assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
Notice those little changes that might not seem like a big deal now,
Right.
but could have huge consequences later on.
So it's almost like having a superpower
Yeah,
to spot those aha moments before they become oh no moments.
exactly. You learn to see those warning signs early on.
Okay.
And it's important to remember that disruption isn't always a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a force for progress,
Okay.
innovation.
Right.
Think about it, without disruption,
Yeah.
we'd all still be carrying around those big clunky cell phones.
The brick phones?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we'd still be using film cameras.
Right. Taking pictures and waiting a week to get them developed.
It's amazing how far we've come.
Okay. I'm starting to see disruption in a whole new light now.
Good.
It's exciting,
It is.
but also kind of scary,
Yeah.
if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
How do we embrace change without getting like totally overwhelmed by it?
That's the big question.
Right.
And something we all need to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
Because whether we realize it or not,
Yeah.
we're all living in a world that's constantly being disrupted.
So if Christensen were writing his book today,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think he'd be highlighting?
Oh, that's a good question.
What are some of those like little changes that are happening right now that could
Really?
totally change entire industries in a few years?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And that's what's so great about Christensen's book. It's not just looking back. It's like a guide for thinking about what's going to happen next.
Hmm.
It helps us question what we think we know and spot those little things that are changing that maybe no one else sees, but could turn out to be huge later on.
So it's like he's giving us this superpower to see disruption before it even happens.
Yeah, and with great power comes great responsibility, right?
There you go.
We got to use this knowledge wisely.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if you're leading a team, building a startup, or just trying to figure out your own career path. Understanding this stuff can be a total game changer.
Okay, so we started with those early digital cameras, then talked about smartphones, and even those mini mills changing the steel industry.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
It's clear that disruptive innovation is a powerful force.
It is, and it's a force we need to understand. If we want to do well in a world that's always changing, it's about recognizing the signs, being ready to adapt, and maybe even, channeling a little bit of that disruptor energy ourselves.
You know what I'm thinking? We can all be disruptors in our own ways,
Absolutely.
whether it's at work, in our communities, or even just how we see the world.
Yeah, it's about being curious, questioning the way things are, and yeah, maybe taking a few risks every now and then.
So, for everyone listening, what's the big takeaway here? What should we be paying attention to? What questions should we be asking?
I think the main thing Christensen is telling us is don't fall asleep at the wheel.
Right.
Keep your eyes open for new technologies, shifts in how people are behaving, things that seem small now but could explode later on.
So, we're not just surviving disruption, we're using it to our advantage.
Exactly. We're using it to make things better.
I like it.
And remember, disruption isn't always about some fancy new gadget. It can be a new way of thinking, a new way of doing business, even a new way of tackling those big problems we all face.
So, it's not just about what's changing around us.
Mm,
It's about how we're changing, how we're rolling with the punches, and maybe even throwing a few punches of our own.
couldn't have said it better myself. The world's changing faster than ever, and if we want to stay ahead of the game, we got to stay curious, keep learning, and never be afraid to challenge the way things are.
There you have it, folks. Another deep dive in the books. We dug into the innovator's dilemma, learned the secrets of disruptive innovation, and hopefully got you thinking in some new ways.
And maybe inspired you to shake things up a bit in your own life.
Until next time, deep divers, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep disrupting.